All right. So take two. Oh, hello, everybody. Welcome to the True Sight podcast. And I am here with Professor Mo, recently retired. And we just ran into each other on the street, which is a hilarious story. And I got to reading his book. And well, it fascinates me, both public relations, because my family's been in politics, and uh, intelligent user interfaces, which is what I'm learning right now with computer science. So it's an amazing intersection. So I'm very lucky to have ran into. So yeah,
We'll see.
if you could tell me a little bit about who you are and why did you even get interested in this stuff?
Well, I'm Simon Moore. I'm a retired
Uh,
professor. I taught at a small business university in Boston area called Bentley, and they have a department called Information Design and Corporate Communication. So it's really about where communication and organizations and people meet. And I am actually a historian by background, but I worked in PR for a while. And so, not unnaturally, my interest is really on the impact of this information revolution on society and on the individual. And so I've written a little bit about that, and also given some conference talks and things like that. So it's an area of interest of mine. And as the information revolution intensifies, because we're only at the very start of it, really, it's going to become a more important subject, I think.
I see. So how did you end up in Bentley? I hear the British accent, and I'm like,
Oh,
you guys have grown up in England.
yeah, yeah. I was I did my. Yes, I am British. I was brought up there, did my various degrees there, and worked in PR. But if you have a doctorate, it's a very hard habit to break. Yeah, it's a certain amount of autonomy
Right.
in it that I find attractive. And kind of long story short, there was an advertisement. I applied. It was a kind of thing I was interested in, and got offered the job. And it was about a million years ago. That I've been there. I was there for almost not quite 30 years.
Right.
Very much enjoyed it, and now I'm retired. Yeah. Doing other things really, but
Yeah.
still interested in this topic. I published a book about it.
Right.
Well, the book that you mentioned earlier, I think, shortly after my retirement with a friend. So
So it was
still an interest.
was it? I know that in the industry, it's like publish or die, and you're on perish. Yeah, publish or perish, and but it seems like you were just doing it with a friend. Was it publish or perish? Or
Not at that point. I had tenure,
ah,
so I could have quite happily perished. They've done anything to me. But no, you do it because you're interested. It's not. It's not. I taught students who were business students, and they were great, and I really enjoyed it. And they're bright, and busy types of people. Um, but of course, they're very much task oriented, which is natural, and it's not by no means a criticism. Okay, give me this job. How do I do it? How do I get from A to B,
right.
as efficiently as possible, or as well as possible? I hope, but as efficiently as possible. But profs aren't really that way. We have well, not all of them anyway, have the privilege of being a sort of like an observer, looking in or looking out at the world, and that sort of interested me more, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it's no hardship to research and write these topic about things that I'm interested in, and you have the autonomy to find things that interest you after you've got tenure,
Yeah.
which is that's a tough process. But once you've got it, you have that freedom,
Yeah.
and hopefully you don't abuse it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I if it's okay with you, I would love to dive into your book.
Go for it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I didn't finish it, but I was because I was a little bit hung up on what IUI is, and I struggle with kind of getting the understanding from a book
Yeah.
without the tonality. So
Yeah.
I would love to hear from your mouth on a video how, like, what this topic is really about.
Well, my topic, or our topic,
Mhm.
Roland Hoopscher and myself, is a friend at Bentley.
Mhm.
Uh, it's really based, at least for me personally, on the premise that uh, humans are in a race against time to reach a mature working relationship with this overwhelmingly powerful technology, which I'll describe in a minute,
Yeah.
which has the power to shape our perceptions and potentially raise us to new heights or subjugate us
Right.
to whatever messages it's trying to
Yeah.
deliver, or people are trying to deliver through it. Because there's
Right.
always some technology is just a tool, like a hammer. It's a
Mm.
hand on the hammer.
Yeah.
The people behind the tool. So that's really what the subject is about, and I've always been interested about that. The one before that was sort of the book before this one. This is called Strategic Communication and AI. The
Right.
one before it I wrote was called PR and Individuality, and it's really the whole thing is about the movement away from individual reflection and the capacity to do that, uh, and to gather knowledge uh, from a variety of sources, to something a lot more um, collective, a lot more vivid, in that it uses the intelligent user interfaces to engage not just our minds,
Right.
but all our senses in order to deliver a message. So intelligent user interfaces are really anything
Right.
which anything applied to any technology that the user uses to uh, interact with in order to get what they want, but also to receive and exchange messages. So the obvious one for the modern era
Right.
is a cell phone,
Right.
and the apps on the cell phone. And a less obvious one would be a coin. Coins were one of the early intelligent user interfaces. They appeared in about the 7th century
Right.
in Lydia, which is was a kingdom in what is now Western Turkey, and they too became an interface because states realized and kings realized they could put messages on it. These coins are perfect media.
Right. Right. The emperor's faces or his mother.
Yeah, or
That signals something.
yeah, it signals something, and what they may write on the coin, or the gods, or the symbols that they put on the coin. And coins are is not much different in many respects from modern media like cell phones or apps. They're light, they can circulate, they're durable,
Right.
which is an advantage they have with things like stone media.
Right.
And people want them. People want money.
Right.
So these coins were also interfaces to send messages, and they used them the same way. If you became, say, Emperor of Rome, you went to the mint and got your head stamped on the coins as soon as possible,
Right.
because you wanted people to see where the authority lay now, and also something about what their values were.
Right.
And so you see that in interfaces today.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of interested, or Roland and I are both interested in that. And you have interfaces as well as cell phones being one, virtual reality headsets might be another,
I see.
um, and any form of technology really, a brain-computer interface, which is the coming
That's
technology.
that's awesome. I'm studying apart from computer science, I'm studying cognitive science as well. And there was a quote that you uh, cited from Carl Jung that really interested me
Mm.
was of I think on page 15 about how there's this danger of materialism, scientific materialism that like arises, and that message get propagated throughout intelligent user interfaces. And that's definitely what I felt when I first come to North America, was that in Vietnam we're much more focused on, well, what is our family history and what is spiritually binding us. As you can see, I have my picture as my great grandfather because when we were very young, we would pray right in front of, like, at his altar in the house.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, every house have a little prayer table.
I've seen it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you have. Yeah, that's awesome. And you could ask for anything. And you know that the weight of the ancestor is behind you, so you can kind of push forward. But when I came here, it was a big culture shock because there isn't a force that people get pushed towards. So there's only kind of mental desires
Mm.
that grabs at them. No spiritual defenses, as I would say it. And the people that I'm a little bit better off, that can starve off this psychological materialism, I find is those who are more religious, more community oriented. And so, yeah, what do you think about this? Because that was the biggest shock for me when I first came to the Western world.
Well, I think a lot about that. It's hard to know where to start. I mean,
Right. For such a amazing topic. Yeah.
to start the yes, that a lot of the future. Well, I'll make a general comment that which we can disagree with or not, but I personally, I'm not sure if Roland would feel the same.
Yeah.
But I would say personally, unless there is that spiritual dimension, unless there's an inner quality to us, uh, um, if we did not have that, we are going to be putty in the hands of machines. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's potentially. I'm not saying that's necessarily, because I think in the end we'll cope, we'll learn. I just worry about the drama of the journey, and how
A
long.
lot of us can fall.
Yeah, a lot of us can fall. Yeah, but I think society will adapt.
Right.
So and I will also say quickly that I don't think I have. This isn't about anti-science.
Right.
I love science. This has solved a lot of problems.
Oh, yeah.
But also this other part of us, this individual part of us, and you could call it spiritual, you could call it something else.
Right.
If we don't have that, we're just a bunch of chemicals,
Yes.
or biorhythms that eventually scientists will learn to be able to manage,
Yeah.
like factory farmers.
Right.
And I think the danger is, unless we keep that or preserve that or develop that, because people do, I think, want something beyond the material.
Yeah.
And as Jung pointed out in that quote you mentioned, there's a lot of psychological damage when you either parody that kind of spiritual yearning, as in some totalitarian regimes
Right.
in history,
Yeah.
or you go after a new pair of socks, or
Yeah.
some possession or other. So it is a part of the human journey, and the danger of these IUIs that we've been talking about, and I'll stop here, is because I can go on all night, and you up me.
That's not why. That's why we have long form podcasts. Right?
Yeah. The danger of these IUIs, if there is a danger, is that they will become, because we're at the beginning of it. I mean, this iPhone will be obsolete in,
Right.
I don't know, 10 years from now. We'll have it in our heads or something. But well, the danger is that they'll become so vivid, so overpowering, that without that other dimension to us, we'll have no protection.
Yes. Exactly.
We will be overwhelmed potentially.
Yeah.
Some won't, some will. That requires education and reflection, and that other side to us, that inner dimension,
Yes.
that numinous side to us that you're referring to. And Europeans have had that too. The Romans had altars to their household gods, their ancestors as well.
Yeah.
Even today, when we lose a loved one, we'll put photos out
Exactly.
in the West, and we'll have it on a
Yeah.
mantelpiece or a chest of drawers somewhere.
Yeah.
I have my wife's late mother is 2 pictures of her with flowers next to it.
Right. Yeah.
It is. So we are groping for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I worry that this machinery is so powerful now, almost as powerful as the first cave paintings 40,000 years ago. Not quite as powerful, but almost.
Right.
That it will overwhelm. It could overwhelm us.
Yeah. And I think it's overwhelming young men, definitely in the pornography space.
Well, addiction.
Yes, especially pornography addiction, because it's grasping at something so primal, that's so built into us. And so, like, what are young men supposed to do
Yeah.
when it's so accessible constantly in the
Yeah.
phone? And so I'm like, And yeah, so it's like this ginormous quagmire for my entire generation to kind of try to figure out. Because on my figuring out journey, I was listening to Dr. Huberman about how the whole project of the modern day life is to dopamine guard yourself against all these technologies that is out to just drain you of all the dopamine that you should be using for something productive.
Yeah, I take it a bit further than that, but I totally agree
Yeah.
with the gist of it and what he's saying. Yeah,
Oh,
we do. There has to be a certain amount of protection, and the education system, and I'm not picking on any particular country or university, the education system has become a science in itself. It's become a matter of tests and endless grades, and what have I got to do to achieve the next objective, and then I move on to the next test. I'm not sure that's what education should be all about.
I struggle against that badly.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like I want to use my curiosity,
yeah,
not to finish tests.
yeah,
Sounds pointless and meaningless.
yeah.
I want to be interested. I want to build something out of this curiosity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is another issue to do with, but the again, the darker side of technology, the measurement, the endless measurement that we've submitted people to. But my generation, at least in Britain, we were measured every 7 seconds,
Really?
and I think it's a kind of healthier thing. Of course, that system was abused too,
You.
but I think the impact of the current system, it's a kind of offshoot of the technocratic age, I think, of metrics, and metrics of truth, and sometimes they are, but sometimes they aren't. Sometimes they can give you cures for cancer. Sometimes they can, as the totalitarians, if we're talking politics, and it's not just politics, but as the totalitarians discovered, they can uh, it's basically enslave you to an idea and teach you how to respond
Right.
to any alternatives in the correct, approved way.
Yeah.
But again, it's not just politics, is it? It's branding, it's business, it's non-profits. All these techniques will be used in the age of AUIs by every type of organization, including ones we might agree or sympathize with, because they have no alternative in a competitive environment.
Yeah.
They have to use them. So, as your professor said, we need to, as individuals, because ultimately it's us, the individual, that is affected, need to be ready for that,
Yeah.
and need to understand it. But we need a mind of our own before we start becoming extensions of other people's minds.
Yeah. Oh, that concept of extensions of people's minds, I've been kind of integrate into my own life, where the the idea isn't that in my cognitive science class, the idea is that your intelligence isn't here, but it's connected directly to your body. So there's a nervous system.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then there's also the intelligence that which you offload onto your phone when you use Google Maps. And then it's like, and then there's the intelligence of asking your friend for help because of his expertise. So there's not an individualized intelligence, but a web of intelligences.
Of course.
Yeah, with that technology is also entering the game in. And so then like I guess the job of those who are in governance is taking care of that web of intelligence, how it can be hijacked into extremists and kind of um, very damaging parasitic ideas that are very enticing to those who are lazy, those who are not orientated correctly because of some technology that hurt them in the past. And so there's this craziness that I feel that it's going around in my own kind of generation, and it transforms into a lot of psychological damage. And it's like when I first came to Canada, so in Vietnam, the concept of suicide isn't like even talked about because everybody like it's not a thing that even enter your consciousness. But the moment that I came here back in 2012, 2013, 3 out of the 7 friends that I made constantly say an attempted suicide. And I'm like, my God, what is happening with the children here? And we were like 12. And then I immediately turned into this, like, it was almost like in a year I transformed into this adult because I couldn't be a child anymore because everybody around me needs my help. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah, and so it's like, my god, the damage is like, I get to live that firsthand.
Mm.
And I think it's because of the non-understanding of the web of intelligences and how you need to take care of it.
Yeah, the intellectual superstructure to
Yeah.
get it in perspective.
Right.
Yeah, and the result and the peer pressure that
Mhm.
comes when people start succumbing to whatever you're told to do, like wear
Yeah.
green socks, or you're a you're a loser because you vote one way, not the other.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things I would say to that. Yeah, I mean, you also see it in the incredible accommodations industry that has, and I'll call it that, which has grown up across this continent in particular.
Yeah.
Less so in Europe, I think.
Really.
For now,
Right.
again, I don't think this is a product of the things we've been talking about. So I don't see why it shouldn't filter to other places in the end. So that is a sign. In many, not always, but in many occasions it is. I think it's a sign of people feeling insecure because of this world we're taking comfort in, which is
Yeah.
which we are not protected against.
Yeah.
We're absolutely addicted to screens. Someone should write, I don't know if they have, the social history of screens. From the magic lanterns in the 19th century right through to these things as cell phones.
Mhm.
Um, so there is that there is more fragility, and maybe one solution. And I know that some professors who are just giving up with technology in the classroom, but really you need to start at much earlier age.
Yeah.
In schools, in what we used to call primary schools or elementary schools here, and then perhaps educate, as you saying, educate people to understand the design of a message, the choice of words in a message,
Mhm.
the persuasive elements in a message that make you feel a certain way. We have technology now that, again, it's a good and bad side, but you take car companies that are experimenting with drive safe interfaces. So they are reading and measuring people's facial emotions, and drawing conclusions from it when you're busy driving, and they will then try and calibrate their response, whether it's persuasive or more assertive, to the look on your face, and to tell you to drive safely. Maybe that's a good thing, but again, on the other side, we have this other big problem where people at a very vulnerable age are being made even more vulnerable.
Yeah. And it's, do you think it's, how do you call it? Do you think it's intentional, based on your research, or have this merely been a process of people trying to one up each other and make more money, and much more kind of, I don't it's not I don't really want to addict anybody, because I know that not Jeff, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't allow his children to use Instagram.
Why, I'm not surprised.
Yes, right. Because of this, right? And so I wonder, um if he's just kind of trying to keep his head above water in this capitalist game, that is the only game that he knows, and kind of understand that it's hurting young people, but he's still trying to compete nonetheless. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what does deliberate mean? It's not a plot. I don't think that.
No Illuminati.
Well, yeah, I haven't come across any, but I'm not sure I want to if there are any. But it is a partly result of of compet competitiveness.
Mhm.
Also partly result is they improve people's lives as well sometimes, or they give you access to information. Not only are we addicted to screens, we love to gather information,
Right.
and then as these machines, these interfaces become more personalized, only gather the information that we want to gather. Just out the other information. I think it's partly us. This stuff has been invented. It's not going away.
Yes,
We're stuck with it. We've got it. It can help us in very many ways. We have to learn to live with it. I don't think it may be deliberate in some governments. Not
Yeah.
just necessarily regimes, but
Right.
political parties trying to win elections.
Mm.
I mean, they'll do whatever they can legally do to win an election.
Right.
So it's a mixture of factors, and sometimes it's financial, and sometimes it's us. We are attracted to something, and then we feel maybe not just it happens without technology. I like that. I really like that. I want that. I'm going to have that. And these machines help us feel that we're being helped.
Yes.
But the problem is, I think it's also a more subtle thing than deliberate, as you were suggesting. It's there's a transition in these IUIs. We're moving from I'll ask you to do something, play me some Mozart or something,
Right.
plays you the Mozart, to would you like to hear some Mozart? And then
So the proactivity of the
so
intelligent agent.
correct. So it's moving from like being a robot butler, if you like,
Mm.
to a suggester, and then the next one maybe
Right.
manager.
Right.
It could be a very, very by channeling information, it begins choosing who we are going to be.
Yeah.
Uh,
I've been
so that's
struggling
prob-
with this for a little bit. My
Mhm.
God, I have many sleepless nights just because of how quickly everything is moving.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
with the concept of the Butlerian jihad from Deern, in which a jihad is a holy war and Butlerian is a holy war against the machines,
Mm.
because uh, the intelligent machines will one day be more intelligent than what can be in here.
Well, they'll
Mhm.
they'll be able to assimilate information
Yes.
and synthesize it more rapidly. I don't know
Yeah.
if they'll be more intelligent,
Right.
but they'll do that,
Yeah.
and they'll give the impression that they're intelligent into the bargain.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and I was listening to Sadhguru about this, and he's like, so now there is no work in soon there will be no work in intellectual. There will be no intellectual work, and soon there won't be any labor work. So then what are we to do? And then his response is live. And I think
Meaning what?
yes, exactly. And it's like, but I have this inkling that this vitriolic hate toward AI art, for instance,
Mm.
is not because of the technology, but because it lacks what art is supposed to represent, which is a personal human expression of their lives condensed into one picture. And as the art, and so there's a lot of personality that we want within the art, while the thing that are being generated online is much more like, here's a beautiful picture of something that has no soul. And the only kind of art that you can build from it is maybe multiple picture to tell a story, right? But then you're telling your story. Again, this human kind of sharing of the story. And so that's at least my conclusion, is that even if you have chess machines that play better than Magnus Carlsen, we still watch Magnus Carlsen because he freaks out and he slams the table when he loses, and that we can relate to, and that we're
Mhm.
like, I play the chess game, but I get emotional sometimes, and that impedes on my chess game, and that's a very human thing. And obviously, Magnus Carlsen experienced the same thing,
Mm.
and so then it's not really about the output or how you put in the input. It's about how humans are the inputs and outputs.
Yes, it's again that inner quality. Does that it's hard to identify consciousness, a soul. What I don't know what you call it.
Right.
I've read so much about consciousness spoken.
Hey, man, me too. I love reading about.
Yeah, but I'm not sure it got me any further.
Yeah.
Yes, but then again, say you're quadriplegic, and this is the only way you can visualize your story is by interacting with AI to
Yeah.
design images for you. But I totally agree. I mean, they used to say that about cameras.
Mm.
Pre-modern societies, when they were confronted with someone taking their picture, often they would be absolutely outraged because they thought that the device would suck their souls out of them. You know,
Wow.
um,
That's crazy.
and
Yeah.
we have reactions to machines all through history when they show up, and a particular group is absolutely scared of them or terrified, or they're dispossessed by them, and you get machine breaking and riots and things like that. My father had a friend who was a senior scientist and senior figure at Goodyear,
Oh, okay.
and he was beaten up in the in Tibet when he was hiking in Tibet as a middle-aged man by hippies who were so offended by the idea of the scientist and what science has done to the world.
Really?
Yeah, so nice man too. I think he deserved that.
The beating is rough.
Yeah, but yes, the what these machines at the moment will soon be able to do, particularly once you have interfaces that directly lead from the machine into your head, into your eyes, or into your brain, which they developed for people with disabilities in China, for example.
Yeah.
Once you have that, you are having a direct invasion of planned messages, designed by public relations people on behalf of their clients, using all the forms of sight, sound, color, words that they feel will be appropriate for engaging with you on a very, very personal level. It will feel so real.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and it's not necessarily they're lying or that they're being insincere, but they have to do it in order to compete for your mind or
Yeah.
your actions based on what you think, because other people are doing the same. And organizations are now finding themselves in this arms race, if you like, for people's perceptions, because they want even organizations we agree with too, because they need to have our opinions and our assent on a much wider range of issues. To take an obvious one, it's not just this candy bar, this chocolate bar tastes nice.
Yeah.
Has it been ethically sourced? Has it been made? Has it been made without too many artificial ingredients? In X, Y, Z, is the wrapper recyclable?
Yeah.
Is the taste? Is it for the right? Is it for my kind of people, however you identify yourself at that particular moment?
Yeah.
Is this an upper middle class chocolate, for example? You know, um,
That's what.
so it's all about that, and it's all about creating identities that feel real as well.
Yeah.
When we belong to an identity, a shared identity, we feel we have a peer group that we are looking out for, whether it's a team that we support or whether it's a political party or whether it's a hobby. It could be anything, and they'll be able to do that, make us feel a belonging. These IUIs to a particular group, which may or may not be real. It may just be virtual,
Right.
but we may find ourselves preferring that.
Yeah.
But then what? Yeah, then the question is, who are we at the end of all this?
Yes. Yeah.
There's. I'll stop after this, but there's a chap, Marshall McLuhan, who I mentioned. I think I mentioned it to you when we first talked. Who is a Canadian academic, brilliant man.
Right.
I think I told you. I think he had an extra artery going into his brain.
Yes. Yeah. They're amazing.
Yeah, certainly kept his mind fizzing. But he was a sort of a. I hesitate to use these terms, but sort of a prophet and a seer of. He was writing in the 50s and 60s. He anticipated a lot of this in his book. A lot of the books, a lot of the basic problems of what for him was the electronic age. He never saw as far as the internet. But his idea was that, and it was based on his PhD supervisor, Harold Innis, that we like to extend ourselves into mediums. We like to extend ourselves onto social media. We like to extend our personalities and our needs and wants. And electronically, we can do that more and more and more. We can project who we are to the world now.
Right.
We have shattering communication power. But have we reached the point now, which is the discussion I think we were having in that book, certainly in the one before it too, PR and individuality, are we at the point where the media, instead of extending ourselves through media, is the media extending itself, through us?
Ooh.
Are we in fact becoming so absorbed into this collective that the us part, the part that you mentioned when you talked about your altars, in Vietnam,
Right.
or I know a lot of Buddhist friends in Japan have these things
Yeah.
too, and probably my ancestors did as well.
Right.
Are we? Is that now being shriveled up, forgotten? In which case, it will do us damage.
Oh yeah.
Which is why you go back to Jung. If we damage that inner part of ourselves, if it will try and get out as best it can, and it will lead to disruption and possibly disaster.
Yeah. It's definitely like I know of my friends and sometimes me where w- the hour before bed is supposed to be a wind down hour, but nowadays it's more like I scroll on my phone until I pass out. Yeah. And and so there's this like w- how much our brain is backlogged on processing what have happened in our day and the media that we watch, either that's the Israel-Palestine conflict or the Ukraine-Russian conflict. And so I feel like even if you have an extra artery in your like in your neck, you can't process this. And you're just screwed when it comes to like actually getting some peace and silence. And I'm like, that's why later, I think maybe this July here or August, I want to head down to the Isha Foundation Institute of Inner Science down in America, down in Nashville, near Nashville, to kind of get away from this all and do some meditation, some yoga, just so that my brain can be like, okay, now I got some time to process what the hell is going on. And I'm like, and I'm kind of scared because of how big the backlog I know exists. Just trying to keep up in this day and age where as a software engineer, you got to learn this and that software language. And then, oh, never mind, that's all obsolete because now there's agents. Oh, down for you. Now it's all about the math, but oh well, now all the math is also done by agents and they're getting better and every day. And then how do I even orientate myself? And um a kind of defense against this for me has been um kind of trying to understand what my interest is, what I'm truly passionate about, and from what I can understand, these conversations are what I really care about. And so I know then, despite things being better or at programming than me, there's still this human side that I can display onto the market that like work that I need to do and make some money and the people I hope will appreciate that kind of genuine interest in having these conversations, in trying to understand governance, trying to read Lee Kuan Yew's book, because he's like a shining example of an oasis in Southeast Asia where I come from. So we're very proud of him and and understanding the pragmatism and understanding how to not fall into these ideological traps that are just constantly everywhere in these IUIs, as you call. And they're like,
Well, it's going to get. That's the potential. That's the danger side again. It's these things could help shed light. They could shed They could shed darkness. They could shed heat. And yes, there is actually. I think there's an uptick in Christianity as well going on at the moment too.
Islam.
I think any attempt to try and recover that part of us that is inside us, whatever you want to call it, and is never, according to Jung, is you can't wipe it out.
Yeah.
And even if it wasn't there, we need something very much like it, or else again we're just going to become tools, playthings, and there are bigger organizations, not necessarily evil, but competing as best they can to be heard, using the technology, the competitive technology of their times.
I see.
There's a novel called it's called Winesburg, Ohio, by a guy called Sherwood Anderson. He was a predecessor of Ernest Hemingway, but he was writing about, I guess he modeled it on his own Midwestern town in America. But he made a point in the 1890s, he was looking back. Even then, newspapers were proliferating then. It was
Right.
like a boom in newspapers in the late 19th century, in the same way we had the dot-com boom,
Oh, wow.
much
Right.
the same sort of thing. But then he noticed that people in his town they weren't thinking independently, they weren't speculating, they weren't imagining anymore. They were just picking up the lines that they read in the newspapers and parroting stuff that was written for them, basically.
Yeah.
So it's not a unique to history, but it's just much more intense. And say you go to a retreat to try and, I suppose, intellectually detox from the buttons and the apps and the noise.
Yeah. Because it's so unconscious. As Carl Jung says, you gotta make the unconscious conscious, right? And I'm like, man, these things, even though they're feeding me good information, I'm not conscious of this and deliberate. And what's even more scary, as I realize, is that I'm becoming less of I'm becoming less of an agent. I have less agency within my own life because things are just getting spoon fed to, and then my muscle for agency atrophies, right? And then so like,
That's a very nice way of putting it.
and I'm like, but when Dr. K says it's like these muscles just rust. They don't exactly get eliminated. So there's a hope for us to kind of regain this agency.
Mm.
Yeah.
But again, we need to create a society which helps us to do that. If we want to be humans and not extensions of media,
Right.
I think that's what's at stake. I think it will happen, but again, it might be a hell of a ride before we reach, as has been said, the old saying, when all else fails, people will turn to common sense. So
That's a great
we
saying.
may try everything first before we do some of the things that need to be done.
Yeah.
Now, wisdom and information are not the same thing,
Yes.
and we have to learn from a very early age wisdom. And there are plenty of examples in the world through history that we could use to do that. The great religions, the philosophers, artists, any act of human achievement and beauty that elevates the human faculties enriches us and enriches our humanity, that side of us that will, whatever the pressure, as you say, somehow hang on,
Yeah.
even if it's badly scarred.
Yeah. It was quite interesting when I when I'm going through this battle to reclaim my mind. I My dad wrote a book about my great grandfather, and I get to read through it, and it was really cool experience because the genetics that ran through him runs to me. So it's a weird thing to read about somebody who was a public figure that the Vietnamese people cherish and love and pray to, because there was a famine during 1975 around there. No, sorry, a little earlier, of 1940 something, and the French was the colonizers, and they were in charge of us. And they during this famine they locked away all the rice, and my great grandfather defied those orders and just like opened the gates for the rice to feed his people anyways, because he didn't he he was in the job not because he believed in the French colonial ideology. He was in the job because this was the only way that he could help out. And I'm like, and then there was another, so that was like a defiance on a high order that which he was punished for. And there's also the defiance during 1945 to 1954, in which Ho Chi Minh and him was up in the mountains, and they were just sitting there, and they were in like with the tribes people, and they were just fighting the fight that was really like hopeless, because you're fighting a colonial power that is the French. Like this, this is as chalked as a thing can be. But he smiles in those pictures. And I'm like, if the genetic that runs through me can fight 3 wars with 3 superpowers and smile in the pictures with his people. Maybe I can handle a few media that's trying to overtake my mind, and so there's this reclaiming of resiliency that one gets when one appreciates and learn from their one ancestors. And I'm like, to experience that firsthand, I'm like, holy, maybe things aren't so bad, and maybe I can totally win this fight.
Yeah. You learn from faith, or you learn from example,
Yeah.
as you've just said, and yeah, for sure. I mean, we all have stories like that. My grandfather spent a year and a half living in France, in a trench in the First World War.
Oh yeah, that's
So,
that war was horrific.
so he lost two brothers and etc. So, and then he recovered, Great Depression in the 30s, and he lost his job and then had to start again as a shopkeeper, which was a step down.
Oh.
And then the Second World War came along, and their house got hit, by a bomb. So, which I think we should be able
Yeah,
to survive what we're going through now. That's why I'm ultimately optimistic.
yeah,
But
because how you resilience.
but we will have to learn. I don't want to diminish the difficulties here. It was the same in the Industrial Revolution, which began in my home country in the
Right.
late 18th century. It was incredible upheaval,
Yeah.
and it destabilized the world in the end. But but again, I don't think we'd want to go back to pre-industrial conditions. Now we learnt to manage it as best we could, not perfectly, but we learned to live with it and benefit from it, as is proof by us sitting in here, and by this
Enjoy.
technology.
Yeah.
Most historians will say, what's the best time? I always think I began as a historian, most historians will say, when's the best time to be alive? A lot of them would just say now.
Yeah. All the tuberculosis doesn't feel that great.
Tuberculosis dying at 13 when so yes, so it's not all bad, and I think you're right about resilience, if that's the right word. I would prefer wisdom,
Right.
and maybe the educate, but I'm not. I 100% agree with what you're saying. Maybe we need an education system that restructures itself to inculcate wisdom, not smartness, or at least restore the balance between the two.
Right. Maybe some more imagination, less knowledge. Like
Yes, I think that's a nice way of putting it. Imagination. Um, you do need the knowledge, because especially if you go, say, for the, when you graduate with your undergrad, you've already started to specialize.
Right.
I'd say as you progress through your life, you become a specialist, so you have to have knowledge.
Right.
But that's why you need the wisdom, because as you specialize, you have to think about it more deeply, and you have to reflect on its impact and on the purpose of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you probably will find yourself stressed or under pressure, or overreacting to.
Yeah. So violence to oneself,
Yeah,
violence
violence
to others, all kinds of
I did use the word violence, and I was going to pull back, but I think you put that well. Inner violence.
Yeah, inner violence. I find. I was talking to my friend about this, and I was like, he was so kind of pursuing his arts, and the kind of pressure that he feels, economic pressures when you're trying to pursue the arts, and I'm like, and it's just like, and how disheartened he is on like, oh man, there's so many other artists that are so good compared to me. Yeah. And I'm like, when are you gonna let yourself free? When are you gonna stop playing their game where it's all about the money? And when are you just gonna put out what you want to put out? And because you have all the tools, you have the microphones, the filming equipment, the computer, the drawing tablet to get all this done. Yet the one thing that puts you back is, man, how much money do I need to get from this? And I'm like, then I remember of stories of people who like kill themselves because their job is too high pressure, or their heart gives out at 50 when, because again their job is too high pressure. And I'm like, so you're standing on this battlefield, this mental battlefield of people invading your mind, and you're fighting, and you're tarred and feathered, and they ask for even more of you, and then you turn on yourself and be like, "Oh, this is not good enough," and then you fall and you die. And I'm like, when are you gonna stop and see that, like, it this alienation of the capitalist system that causes you to give all that you can, and when you can't give any more, it asks for more, and then you turn that into violence within, instead of fighting outwards and be like, "Holy shit, I need to change something within the system," but instead point that violence inward and then kill yourself. That is like an enemy to this alienation system. um like, the alienation system wants you to do that, because if you're fighting it and then you choose to die instead of actually win, it wants that as an enemy, because you just give up. You just can't handle the pressure. And I'm like, my God. And so that's why I'm like, I'm trying to not get conspiratorial, but this ominous setup of the system that caused people to turn inward and cause violence within. I'm like, man, somebody set this up, and I'm kind of suspicious that somebody set this up, right? And I'm kind of, every time I reread Karl Marx, I'm like, man, I don't want to be that guy, but at least the alienation of a capitalist system I can see in full force. I understand that it builds a lot of amazing technology for health and for quality of life, but it definitely is failing, and is intentionally failing people and causing this alienation. And as intelligent beings, we have to be like, okay, we take the good and try to fight the bad and not fall to it, you know?
Every system has, not just political, has the roots, contains the seeds of its own destruction, because it contains internal contradictions. Aristotle would have said that famously in politics. We're on he called it the political cycle. We're moving from monarchy to tyranny to aristocracy to oligarchy ruled by the rich to polity ruled by the slightly the next group down to democracy, and then the chaos that democracy can bring, and then we're back on the cycle again. And I went to communist countries when I was in my 20s, and they bring their own peculiar pressures as
Oh
well.
my God, exactly.
I would not want to go back to, say, Romania in 1989 or
Yes.
anything like that.
Yeah.
For
And
sure.
so I'm like, man, both these systems kind of suck.
What we do is a production and ideas. We have liberated people to specialize and develop technologies and ideas, but that brings with it
Yes.
pressures.
Yeah.
Is it a conspiracy? No, but are there a few people that are there people who are much more influential than others in shaping perceptions? Yes, of course there are,
Yeah.
because they have more power, more money, more connections.
Right.
Yes, they do, but that doesn't mean they're not. They're just pulling the strings and we're just obeying. I don't think there's anything like that. But there is this mediating factor, which brings us to public relations and IUI. Public relations, you can call it perception management. If it didn't exist, we'd have to reinvent it, because as a society, we need to have some form of messaging that allows us to cooperate.
Right.
And as the messaging gets more and more sophisticated, and as the number of things we need to cooperate over increases, then we get these pressures, and then we get the aspirations that we can't meet and the discontent, and we've always had it, but it increases, it accelerates, because we see we have more knowledge about the people around us,
Right.
and yeah, I never had this growing up. I can remember the other time, and in some ways it was better, in other ways it was not, but in some ways it was. And for example, books, another interface. book reading, as actual Marshall McLuhan pointed out, is a very individual activity. It's a personal activity.
Yes.
We can read a book. It's us and the book. And we're drawing on a community of knowledge, but we're not being distracted by the other stuff. It's a much more controlled environment. Now, we're moving into a post-literate society in a way.
I'm trying to fight that. Yeah, no, yeah. I'm trying to give books a shot. Give them a shot. Reading 2.0.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I would almost recommend it as a as a form of spiritual retreat in a way. A lot the world's wisdom is for $10 you can buy as a world's wisdom.
Yeah.
It's
There's some potent stuff out there.
yeah, but it's just you. It's not you being interfered with by music, by colors, by dancing lights, by special effects, by an overwhelming virtual reality, and by machines that are trying to understand how you're feeling.
Yeah.
It's a much more autonomous activity, and perhaps that's what we're short of, and perhaps that's why you're going on your retreat.
Because see, part of me really loved the dancing lights and the
Of course you do.
Yeah.
So do I.
Exactly. And I'm like, man, I wish I can somehow understand if the information that kind of subliminally being pushed in with the action and the dancing lights.
Oh yeah, the choice of words, the colors, the way a headline, every story that you see in the media is carefully curated and chosen,
Right.
and the words are carefully structured
Right.
in order to reach a certain group of people.
I love it. It's like it's the framing. There's this amazing piece of media called Death Note that talk about mind games between a man who can write any name into a book and kill them if he has an image in his book.
Oh, how interesting!
And a bunch of detectives who are geniuses trying to find him, right? And so, well, everybody who's smart really loves this kind of a piece of media, and I'm like, but that's real, and it's less about the story, the news story, but about the framing of what story shows up on your feed. And so is this battle for people's kind of frame, much less individualized story, a battle for a mindset that you can install into people. Now that's where like the real battle's taking place. And if you're intelligent and you're interested, you get to watch this battle and kind of see how the battle get applied to you. And with public relations, see how this battle can be used for good or for bad. Depends on what you want. Maybe you're a bad guy. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I am. Maybe none of us are, or maybe all of us are. Yeah, it's a tool. I think one of the most important things I used to say to my students, undergrads, tell them. I've probably mentioned it earlier here, but you have to be aware that the people you agree with are using this, doing the same thing.
Yes.
So don't call something propaganda, because your side is, if you're talking politics, I also tell them I'm sick of politics. But if you're talking politics, your side's doing, if you have a belief system, your side is doing it using exactly the same techniques as the other side. And maybe they're less scrupulous in how they use them, but that doesn't necessarily change the information. That's for you to find out as an individual, if you're that interested.
Right.
But most of us don't even have the time to find out all the information we're being bombarded with. There's no time. We're asked for opinions on, we're asked to take stands on so many different things. Again, not just political. And if we were really trying to reach an objective viewpoint, we'd have to say, I think a famous analogy was made, I think in the late 1920s by one of the founders of modern PR called Ed Bernays, who was actually Freud's nephew, believe it or not.
Oh, yes. I was researching him.
Yes.
Yeah.
He wrote Propaganda and several other books. Propaganda was not a dirty word back then. We can talk about that later.
Wow.
It just meant you were propagating something.
Yes.
So he would say, just to buy a shirt, if you really wanted it, A, there may not be an objective opinion on this shirt. but you'd have to do research into the science of the production process, into the threads, into the quality of the fabrics, into the design, into the designer's record. It's impossible. We can't do it. Never mind on all the things, other things. Okay, what did they say? That's a good one-liner. I'll go with that. Oh, I like that person's shoes. I can have some. So it's we just have not got the time. But now there is so much of that we virtually haven't got time for anything. And the result is we're constantly stressed, or one of the results is that we're constantly stressed. And to an extent that I wasn't when I was in my teens, not to the same extent.
Yeah. So you're at this bleeding edge of PR, and I'm understanding that you're probably out of 1,000 people the most informed on public relations and the technology that propagates public opinions and all that. Um, is there anything that's so new, that's so bleeding edge that I am missing? Do you think? Like, is there because I know about psychological operations from the FBI. That seems a little more bleeding edge than what is available to the public, and how they have steps to create a psychological operations and apply that. And my question is, like, is there something that's developing that's even more complex and is even more powerful than the psychological operations?
Yes.
Oh my.
But of course there is. It's inevitable. Look at the number of places designing interfaces that are so compelling and overwhelming. So
Right.
yes, but I would say I'm certainly not the PR guru to the world, but I am interested in the impact, the interaction between managed persuasion and us as people. I'm not going to use the word society because it's so individualized now.
Mhm.
For me, there's two things. Firstly, there's the use of robots to do PR,
Mm.
and for technology to do the PR. We'll get with AI and machine learning. The combination of machine learning and user interfaces will be absolutely incredible because we'll have machines that will end up trying to persuade each other. So
This is gonna be fun.
yeah, or it might not be, but
I know the dead internet theory talks about that.
yeah, we'll have machine to machine public relations. So
Machines trying to convince other machines so that they can convince people. Oh, that's fun.
yeah, possibly. Or do they need the people in the
Yeah,
end?
yeah.
Maybe they'll start saying to each other, I know why we're here. What are those people doing? You're fired. So, right. So the danger for me is that they take over the whole persuasion process, the whole decision process
Of a government entity
of
or all.
anything, any activity, and then what are we left with? Can we pull the plug out? You know,
Right.
what can we live without them? While they're doing all this, what will we do? Will they?
Yeah.
Are we still capable of? We are, but we don't know.
Yeah.
Are we still capable of acting as autonomous individuals apart from the grip of the machines? If they turn the machines off, will we? Will we just fall apart?
Yeah.
There's a dystopian short story written by Z.M. Foster called The Machine Stopped, and it's written about 1902, 1903.
Oh, wow.
It's a short story, you can see it online, and it's very much about this. It's a world where everyone lives in their own little bubble, and they're getting their information on an internet-type devices in their little pods.
1902.
Yeah, because they're using tubes and things,
Right.
and of course, being a novelist is thinking about people, they're just cutting themselves off from humanity in order to get information about, say, impressionist painters. But of course, we know they're looking at sports, pornography, and astrology.
Yeah.
But human contact becomes less and less attractive to people.
Yeah.
And then one day the machines break down because the power source breaks down, and suddenly humans are absolutely we're like ants when the colony's been destroyed.
Yeah.
Where do we go? What do we do? We've lost the superorganism,
Yeah.
and That is the danger, which again brings us back to perhaps a system of education that doesn't treat students like future employees,
Yes. Yeah.
but like something beyond that. Not, and again, it has to start very early.
Yeah.
I think it will inevitably happen, but when is the question, and how much damage will be done in the process,
Yeah.
But a lot of good things will be done too,
Right.
Be a user interface might be able to help, as I said, a paraplegic do things they could not otherwise have imagined,
Mhm.
Uh, it might lift them paradoxically out of a vegetative state whilst returning us to a vegetative state.
Where we love not vegetation and vegetation, and we want to swap between them.
Uh, and also knowing how to talk to each other, Yeah. Will we have are we in danger of forgetting that? Are we in danger of learning how to, um, and this is a point others have made, learning how to have an argument?
Yeah.
An argument is not shouting and shutting people out and cancelling them and all those other terrible aspects of the modern world. It's about a discussion. Okay, here's my point of view. Okay, I take on board this, that, and that's interesting. And have you considered this?
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Could be much more civilized. Yeah.
yeah, well, much more helpful,
Yeah.
much more enriching,
Yeah.
and much more social.
I'm kind of over debates in that, like, people just dig into their uh, ideas about their wrong ideas, shitty ideas, instead of an actual productive conversation where the two ideas kind of merged and synthesized into something new, like Hegel's thesis, antithesis to synthesis, right?
Mm.
That's a much more helpful process compared to what the heck a debate is, where you just dig in like, oh no, you're wrong and you're wrong, and I'm like,
Yeah, no,
yeah, these former debates I find very unhelpful.
no, we get the leaders we deserve, and again, I'm not taking sides. We're currently in a system where that's much more intense because again, politicians are subject to, they're no different from us. They're subject to the same conditions. They have to use all the technology at their disposal, and it's
They're human too, is what
most of them confrontational.
some of them might be lizards. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think we're again. It comes back again to the search for something beyond. What am I going to do next in order to earn a salary? And not discounting that, we and in fact, it might even enrich that process of of doing the daily things to get you through life.
Yeah.
But we can't because we can't go the other extreme either. Like I know there's a big movement amongst Chinese. Lie flat or
Yes,
let it rot.
cares about that. We
Not
can't.
doing anything.
You gotta have agency.
You've got to do something. Yes, you can't. You'll be lying flat and you're 50.
Yeah.
That's a dreadful look.
Yeah.
No,
You only got 80 years in this earth. We gotta try something.
yeah, maybe 81 if you're lucky. But yes, you have to do something. What a world! You're just sitting there rotting and resenting.
Yeah. I do have a quick question for you before we end off. You mentioned something, the invention of money. Have you heard, as a historian, have you heard about the axial age?
What's the axial age?
Yeah, so I think it's by a prominent historian. Is that after the 7th century BC, an axial age happened, in which it's ginormous intellectual age. So Socrates. So in the 5th century BC, we got Socrates, the Buddha, we got Lao Tzu and Confucius, and then we got Zoroastrian, and so there's this boom after a kind of late stage capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what they were going through, for all the intellectuals to come out of the woodworks and be like, okay, we ought to actually figure out how we should live here. And then, like, now most of the philosophical literature, religious literature, at least for the Buddhists, come from that age, and definitely from the Confucius. And so uh, I'm very hopeful that after this late stage capitalism kind of reach its natural conclusion, a great age of spiritual and intellectual of evolution for humanity happens because we all sit around like, ah, shit, we gotta figure this out. It's like, well, one guy owned everything already, so now owning means nothing. So it's kind of like, what are we to do? And and it's like the Buddha ties into this in some sense because, well, he came from a man who owned like a kingdom.
Yes,
So like
Arthur, and a
exactly,
king.
yeah. And so then, but then he also didn't reach this state of and ceasing of suffering that he was looking for. So he had to walk the earth and try to meditate and try to sit down in a Bodhi tree and be like, okay, enlightenment, here we go. You've got to figure it.
Achieve the obliteration of desire.
Exactly. Obliteration of the individualized self,
Yeah, you
ego
dissolve
land.
yourself back into the universe
Yeah.
in which you are a part. And I
Exactly.
mean, there's a lot of analogies there with particle physics, obviously, and Christianity too, actually. Some of the mystics in Christianity. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the axial age, those ages have gone on, have occurred.
Yeah.
I might say in response to that, it is also a result of a society that are wealthy enough to produce surplus, which allows people to do these things
Right.
and still survive physically.
Right. Yeah.
So, which is um, kind of useful. And we've had it at we had it actually in the eve of the First World War.
Oh, okay.
There were a lot of people. One of the reasons the First World War was so welcomed was because people saw this as a great spiritual opportunity to give back and to sacrifice.
Mm.
It wasn't just blind patriotism. It's our turn now to do something noble, something that is not just about squalid materialism and so
Yeah.
on and so forth. So this has happened different points, and it happened in the 60s as well, when the
Rest.
children of the people that fought in both wars, suddenly were rich enough to say, "Hey, I'm tuning out," and et cetera and so forth, and they produce their own sages,
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't think it is true, though. I can't think of many of the same quality of the 6th century BC, but maybe we are. I honestly couldn't tell you,
Yeah.
but I could say to you, well, as a historian, the wheel turns,
Right.
the wheel of fate and the wheel of fortune, and it certainly turns politically, as Aristotle noted it, um, in the 5th century BC.
Yes.
It may well. I hope it turns again.
And with 8 billion people, we might be able to reach a new spiritual age that is even more insightful.
Yes.
Maybe we can go past the Buddha and go past Confucius in our understanding. Yeah.
Take us to the take us to the next take us to the next level. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe these things that we've been talking about, these interfaces that have such power,
Right.
will be able to help us once again, once we
Yeah.
learn how to use them wisely
Right.
and not to diminish what makes us a very, very special species that we are.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect conclusion, a very helpful conclusion to our first ever podcast. So I thank you very much for coming on,
No, welcome.
for being here. And I'm glad that your mind kind of aligns with mine when it comes to this kind of interest. So I hope that you come on some other time, maybe a few months from now.
Oh, I'm in PR. I align with everyone's.
It does sound, have I been just playing into your game?
Yeah, yes, you might have been. No, I wrote a book about it, so I must
That's a long con.
Yeah.
You tried to fool me.
Yeah. I don't think I'd go to all that trouble.
Exactly. That seems like a lot. And, but when did you start being interested in this? Like,
Well,
was it like from young age?
yeah, well, you never. It's a journey, isn't it? You don't. You don't automatically leap. I'm not like Athena. I didn't leap from the head of Zeus. Uh, well, I don't claim to be I'm brilliant, but I just think we've got this incredible organism, the brain, and we should try and use it to bring us closer to the the profoundest things, I suppose. And this is my particular way of trying to do that. Um, and in a particularly turbulent time.
Yeah.
But then all times have been turbulent for one reason or another. But I would say this is a particularly turbulent one, inwardly and outwardly.
Yeah. And very, very weird kind of turbulence, from what I can tell. Because other turbulence times, there's been very straightforward violence.
Well, it might seem that from where we're standing,
Right.
but it probably was a bit different for them.
Some other kind of mental.
Yeah, we'd need to know the details. They didn't think like us. If someone said the past is a different country, they do things. The past is another country. They do things differently there. But in some ways, they were the same. They had the same concerns, and we are building on them.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll know how to do it properly in the next 10, 15 years or so, before it's too late.
Yeah. This has been very fun. I hope we get to do this again. I don't know, as soon as possible, in my opinion, because there's so much to learn. There's so much to talk.
I end up repeating myself.
Yeah, because I want to elevate myself, man. Like, this come from a practical place, and I'm trying to find the answers for people who are on the verge of suicide. And that's like, I think the most important thing I could do is to be like, how are they attacking you mentally? That's causing you to feel this much anguish.
One of the
Yeah.
one of the things I've always found helpful is to turn the machines off. And,
Yes. Exactly.
and
Yourself should stabilize after the machine.
yeah. When the machine stops, and do other things. That's personal things. I'm not speaking for anyone else, but yeah. My sister has stopped watching the news.
Smart.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we just need to look at it. It's not compulsory.
Yeah. Honestly, I've realized I'm gonna only watch like Lee Kuan Yew lectures instead of watching the news.
Yeah.
Because that's probably much more informative.
Well, he was very. He could speak very, very coherently.
Exactly. Very pragmatically.
Yes, in a very structured way. Yes. Yeah, he was a very excellent interviewee and speaker.
Yeah.
So, yes, indeed.
Man, screw Reddit, screw Twitter. I'm gonna go into the old books.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the wisdom and potential of humanity can be summed up in 40 words. I think you need a bit more. Someone was saying to me, before I shut up, that he was involved in, I think it was a World Trade Center talks for Canada many years ago, and he was a diplomat, senior diplomat. He said, he was talking about the media back then. He said, on one issue, and I've seen this as well, on one issue, we all have it in our specialties, in our specialist knowledge. One issue, one subject can generate a heap of paper for a negotiation about 7 feet high. How could you summarize all that complexity in a tweet, or 2 glib lines on Facebook or something? You cannot. It's impossible. So maybe humility should accompany wisdom as well.
Humility to sit down and watch some long form content instead of being like, I know this. Some 40 words is good.
Self-reflection, creativity, enjoying life on your terms.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you again.
Welcome.
Let's do this again sometime.
If I can think of something, that's fine.
Stop it.